Women Up Radio, designed to facilitate women's empowerment, improve your career, develop your talents, incorporate your passions, achieve fulfillment and success.
Hello, this is Women Up Radio, supporting Empower Women. And today we're talking about women's leadership, courage, endurance and achievement, and particularly the Euro-Arabian North Pole Expedition. I'm joined in the studio by my guest, Felicity Aston MBE, explorer, scientist, speaker and author, and the first and only woman in the world to ski across Antarctica alone. Felicity's just led the successful women's Euro-Arabian North Pole Expedition and is a really wonderful example of leadership and inspiration for all women. So welcome to the programme, Felicity.
Thanks very much.
So, Felicity, you've had a really fantastic and adventurous life. I mean, to me, it sounds like an absolute dream, but also incredibly challenging and needing an enormous amount of drive and dedication. So tell us about your achievements as an explorer and a scientist, and what attracted you to this in the first place?
Yeah, well, it started really with my very first job after university. I was part of the British Antarctic Survey, and so I was sent as a meteorologist to Rothera Research Station, which is a small research facility on the Antarctic Peninsula. Yeah. And at the time, the standard contract was for 2 consecutive winters. So I went down there in December 2000, and I didn't leave Antarctica again until April 2003. So it was 2.5 years. Of being in Antarctica, and you didn't get to sort of go home in any of that time. So I think Antarctica and this kind of polar environment became not just my place of work or somewhere I visited. It became my temporary home, and I think that's why perhaps it lodged itself quite so firmly under my skin. Because when I came back from Antarctica, my first thought was that I wanted to see more of the polar environment. I wanted to head north and see the Arctic, and then just sort of opportunity after opportunity has kind of come along, and so 20 years later, here I am. Calling myself a polar explorer.
Oh, it's wonderful. But I mean, it's, oh God, it sounds amazing. I dream of things like that. But tell me, there's a lot of talk about the lack of women and the problems that they face for advancement in STEM. And you, being a scientist and your career, I mean, not just as a polar explorer, but very much the science part of it. Have you found the fact that you were a woman was a drawback, and was there much discrimination or disapproval for you for following this type of career path?
I mean, I'm not sure it was so overt as that. I mean, when I went to Antarctica with BAS, I was one of very few women there at the time. My first winter, I was one of 3 women on a base of 23, I think we were. And the second winter, there was 21 of us, and I was one of 2 women. So very much in the minority. And I think it took me a while to realise the sort of barriers that were there. I'd been educated in an all-girls school, and so you wanted to be an engineer, you wanted to be a nurse, you wanted to be whatever you wanted to be, and there wasn't so much this obvious division between, oh no, that's not something a girl does, or that's something a boy does. And so for me, I thought it was something I was doing. It's like, oh God, I'm just not doing this right. And then slowly the thought crept in, oh, this is because I'm a woman. It was a bit of a surprise when I, started to realise that that's what was working against me. And, I have had to, I remember when, I was in my 20s being a sort of polar instructor, so teaching others how to keep themselves safe and successful in the polar environment. And, I did have to establish my credentials much earlier and much more firmly than my male colleagues, because particularly being young and being a girl, sometimes it took me longer to be listened to and taken seriously than my male colleagues who were less experienced. So, I have experienced that sort of thing. And I think even now, my expeditions are looked at, I think, as a bit of fun for the girls kind of thing, not taking us.
Oh, really?
And there's a little bit of that going on. But at the same time, the perception is that there aren't women doing this kind of thing, but there are. There are a lot of women out there doing a lot of great stuff, and they have been there for a while. It's just that for whatever reason, people aren't quite so aware of them. And so it's a bit of a pet subject of mine, is talking about women explorers who, 1700s, there were women out there doing great stuff. And yet we think like it's a modern phenomenon, but it's not always been. You just need to look for them. Yeah,
and I know there's another guest I interviewed a few months ago who was a TV documentary and film documentary producer, and she did a series on pioneer women, which she got an award for. And she was talking about pioneers in New Zealand, and obviously it went back, a long time. It wasn't just the modern pioneers; it was grandmothers, great grandmothers, great grandmothers. And she said exactly the same as you. People just don't think that this has been going on with strong women, determined women doing things for generations. It's not a modern thing. It's something that's happened for a long, long time. So being an explorer, what attributes do you think that we need for this, physically and mentally? And do you think it's different depending on whether you're a man or a woman, or are they similar?
I don't think the differences between men and women in the field sort of fit the stereotype, or fit some nice box, that we can point to and go, there you go. I think I've spent time with all male teams, and just been the only women, and I've spent time with all female teams, and it comes down to individuals, and I think this is the message that it's frustratingly hard to get across, is that what we want is a world in which everyone is judged for their own individual merits, rather than assumptions made about us by the colour of our skin, the nature of our religion, our gender, whatever it is. I think everybody wants to be judged for what they are and what they can do. Men cry just as much as the women, and women smell as bad after 6 weeks as the men. It doesn't fit into these nice categories. I've worked with, and this idea that, women are good for the psychological stuff. And in some cases, but I've worked with some women that have been absolute horror shows, and, really, haven't understood around them at all. So I think, still there is this attitude out there, particularly in the polar world, that if you have, firstly, my first frustration is that there are still teams going out there that are, calling themselves British teams, for example, and they're all white middle-aged men. Kind of think that is not a Britain I recognise. And secondly, there is still this kind of attitude, you sort of feel it, that, if you have a woman on your team, you're taking a bit of a hit somehow on the physical side. And yet, they're making up for it with the fluffy stuff, the psychology. And, you still hear this kind of language spoken, like, having women on the team make this better and that better. And it's like, no, actually, I've worked with some women that are far more physically capable than a lot of men that I've been on expeditions with. It just doesn't follow these same old narratives, and it's been one of the really interesting things working with the Euro-Arabian team. It's been an opportunity to talk to a lot of women in the Arab world, and that's not something I've ever done before. And one of the things that really struck me was that, talking to women in the Arab world, they are full of optimism about where women are in their society and the future for women in their country.
Really?
And, that is such a stark contrast to then speaking to European colleagues, where I think more often, not only is there a lack of optimism, there seems to be a sense of frustration, of fatigue, really, that, 100 years of suffrage we're celebrating in the UK this year.
Yes.
And I think a lot of women are thinking, we're still having the same conversations. Change is happening, but it's not happening quick enough. And I think that, people are angry that, we're still having this same problem.
Yeah.
It's time for us to move on.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting that there was that real contrast between talking to women who are in the Arab world who are really excited and optimistic and hopeful, and then talking to European women where that was almost completely absent.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but now that you say that, I know a lot of the Arab women that I've spoken to, they do have a much more positive outlook than a lot of the people over here. But so tell me, going back to the Euro-Arabian North Pole Expedition, why was it all women?
Well, it had to be all women from a cultural sensitivity point of view. If I was wanting to involve women from Arabian countries, I had to offer them that assurance that we would be an all-female team, and not just an all-female expedition team, but also the support team around us would be, as far as possible, women. Because when you're out on the ice, it's not just that you're sharing a tent with your fellow teammates. Which means you're sleeping very close together, you're eating together, you're also the toilet arrangements are that you're going outside into the open. So you can imagine that would be pretty difficult to manage if you had men and women in the same camp, and that feeling amongst some team members that really to be stumbled across by a man when you're in the middle of your ablutions is something quite serious, maybe to most women, but particularly to women of certain cultures. So
I wouldn't like to be stumbled across by anybody, but it would be even worse if it was a man, right?
So that's why it was an all-female team, and also I think for the strength of the message, that it is an all-female team going out here and doing this, and even as for example, the documentary film crew. It was quite difficult to make sure that the film crew were all women.
Oh, really?
To start off with, the director, Holly Morris, sort of said to me, "Well, Felicity, I just can't find, the right people for the team that are women." But I sort of insisted that, we really must, for the message of the expedition as much as anything else. Yeah. And so she went away, and it took her a long time to find the right people, but she did. And afterwards she said to me, Felicity, I'm so pleased that we, pursued it and put the effort in, because, I found some really fantastic women to be on the team. Yeah. And, it was just a matter of putting in that extra time to find them. And so that was quite an interesting kind of take on this whole idea that, of being all women. So even to the point that the scientific team, the team that did all the science, they were also an all-female team.
Oh, really? I didn't realise that all the behind the scenes were women as well.
Yeah, so there are, it was sort of the message that, there are women out there doing all of these things. But sometimes it does take a little bit of looking.
Yeah. And so how did you get involved in it? I mean, was it all your idea to begin with, or were you asked to lead it?
Yeah, no, it was an idea that had been knocking around in my head for quite a while, probably going on, 10 years.
Oh, really?
And, it was a matter of the right time to do it, and
the right time with a 10-month-old baby.
Yeah, well, I mean, the project
I love that
before the baby came along. So he was the cause of a bit of a delay, because originally we were supposed to be going in April 2017, but I was 6 months pregnant at that point.
Yeah, so not ideal, right?
We had to, I'm up for doing most things, but I thought that was probably pushing it a little.
Just a touch, yeah.
We delayed by a year.
Yeah.
So then it was a matter of finding the team and then finding the support. I mean, in terms of the science and the film, both Audrey, the principal investigator of the science, and Holly Morris, the director of the film, they approached me when they heard about the expedition happening and said, I really want to get involved to do X, Y, and Z. And I felt that both those things really added to the project and what we were doing. So so these things tend to sort of evolve and grow as they go along.
Like the baby.
You are listening to Anna Letitia Cook at Women Up Radio.
Okay, tell me more about leading this type of expedition, because obviously the majority of people haven't got a clue. So what do you have to consider and what strategies do you have to put into place?
Yeah, I think the first thing that's really hard with this kind of project is remembering what it feels like not to have a clue where you're going, and to have that level of inexperience, because it takes quite a lot of patience, and also I think you have to employ quite a lot of empathy, because when people are feeling anxious about something, when they're feeling vulnerable, that comes out in a number of different ways. And for some people, it's obsessing over equipment, for example. For others, it's maybe becoming irritable or difficult within the group. For others, it's sort of a real attachment to family and getting family involved in a project, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. So I think as you're going through the project, when all these problems arise, I try and remind myself that probably this is linked to the root cause of this is that people are anxious or worried, and so I try and preempt that by reassuring people as much as possible. So every time we had a training, it was about sort of going back to basics and reassuring everybody that we weren't going to do anything unless everyone was happy about it. Just trying to make everyone, I guess, feel in control of what was happening, because often that feeling of, oh my goodness, we're going to be dropped on the ice and then I'm going to have no control over what's happening, can make problems worse. So the root of my tactic, my strategy, if you like, is just to try and empathize with everyone as much as possible, to be as patient as I can, and and try and make everyone feel as reassured as possible and as in control as I can. Yeah.
I mean, for you, wasn't it a real strain? Because it's a big responsibility to take people that have really got no experience at all in this type of thing. I mean, I'm sure most of your expeditions, if you're with a team, most of them have some kind of history or background or doing something like this. But for the all-women expedition that you've just done, from what I understand, most of them have got no experience of this type of thing at all. So that must be an enormous extra responsibility for you.
Yes, and also from the point of view that all those people are putting their faith and confidence in me, that I'm giving them the right skills, the right information. And I think that's, for me, perhaps the biggest weight of responsibility is the fact that they are trusting you to give them the skills that they need to keep themselves safe and to be successful. But with all these things, I think it's really hard sometimes for people that are not doing this to understand the difference it makes to be an expedition team versus a guided group. We were putting together a team that would look after itself. And, you could say, well, I was the de facto guide, but, I'd never done this trip before. I'd never been up to sea ice at that high latitude on skis before. So, I wanted the team to have that investment in the expedition, to take ownership of it, to be making their own decisions and to feel that they were equipped to make those decisions. And that is becoming increasingly rare thing to have, particularly in the Arctic, to have an expedition team rather than a guided group. Because I think of the, how difficult it is to give yourselves the confidence and the training beforehand, to go out there and do that. But I think we gained so much from that experience, from that fear that you feel before you go out. Every single person on that helicopter as it flew us out to our start point, you can see from the photos the looks on people's faces. Every single person, including myself, had a real moment of, oh my goodness, what have we done? What was in for? And I think, facing up to that and then coming out the other end, oh my goodness, that is such a rewarding learning experience. And if you and you don't get that through doing it any other way. Having that sense of ownership and responsibility is the only way to get that true sort of, oh my goodness experience.
So that really is such a good example of growing and empowering yourself, and empowering other women. So
exactly, it's about for me personally, it's about giving all those women as much of the skills and confidence that I can. And then when we're on the ice, I then feed back off of that, because we're out there on the ice and we're making decisions as a team. And of course, I'm the one there with the most experience. So when it comes to making a call, that's the call I make. But is the thing about leadership. I think a mistake that's often made is that people think that when they're made a leader, it suddenly means they have to have all the answers. And that's not what it means to be a leader. Being a leader, you make the call on the decision maybe, but you soak up the opinions, the insight of all those people around you, and you make your decision based on that.
Yes, exactly. So what was the biggest challenge for everybody on the expedition? Did everyone have different challenges, or was it similar? Because I know mentally and physically we're all different. I mean, forget gender, just everybody is different. So did some people find the physical things challenging, or the mental, or was it something completely different?
Yes, everyone did have their own different challenges. I mean, the basic challenges were the same for everyone. For example, when we landed on the ice, it was minus 38 degrees Celsius. That's a challenge that affects every single second. It's you're up against that cold because it's relentless. It doesn't go away, and it only takes a short while for it to really cause some damage. And then, everyone has, as you say, their own physical challenges. And again, it's not what you would expect from the outside. So we had women that are incredibly fit, as in they're runners, and they're very athletic, and yet they really struggled from a physical point of view right from the off. And then we had women who were perhaps not so lithe in their physique. By looking at them, you might think, oh, you're going to struggle. And yet, they had that strength and stamina and found it a lot easier than some of them.
Really?
So, it really goes to show that fitness comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And with polar travel, more than any other travel that I've ever done, what's going on in your head seems to make so much more of a difference than the size of your muscles. One of the people on the team who struggled most with the physicality, is on paper supposedly one of the strongest and fittest, and yet I think there were things going on in her head that she brought with her from her personal life that affected the way she was able to perform on the ice. And that's so often the case. You have to make sure your head is fit before your body, almost.
Definitely, because I think that's true with everything, but particularly when you're in extreme situations. If you've got any kind of doubt or fear or something from something totally unrelated, under stress it comes out. So
and this is one of the reasons why this expedition, why I wanted to put together this particular team for an expedition like this, because it doesn't matter where you come from. If you put someone on sea ice at minus 38 degrees centigrade, they're going to feel vulnerable. They're going to feel far from home and out of water. And that's really when you see people's real characters and you see what people are made of. And far more often, I am just inspired, gobsmacked and amazed by how brilliant people are, rather than disappointed. And that was the case with this expedition, is that, there were some amazing performances by people. Ms. Bakan, who you spoke to previously on she celebrated her 50th birthday just a couple of days ago. She's going to be in June, and there she was, skiing to the North Pole, navigating herself to the North Pole, navigating the team, leading the team on some occasions, and and what made that so inspiring was that she herself couldn't really believe that she was capable of doing it.
Really?
The whole time, she's sort of like, I can't believe I'm here and I can't believe I'm doing this. And, she was overcoming her own self-doubt, as well as maybe overcoming other people's skepticism that she was up to it. And it was just a wonderful demonstration of the fact that we're all far more capable than we think we are. Yeah. And, if you give yourself the opportunity, you really surprise yourself.
Yeah. Well, she definitely inspired me. But because of her great attitude anyway, but also when she told me her age and that she was the oldest woman on the expedition, and I know she was 49, I know it's her birthday a couple of days ago, but that as well, because I'm an older lady, I would have been far older than Misbah, but I think that is such a wonderful example that it really doesn't matter what age you are, it's what you've got in your head, what you feel about life. And for her to have the courage to do it, and what you've just said about how she overcame self-doubts, how she was really doing amazing things, I think it's wonderful. I mean, for everybody, all of the team, I'm going to have to sit down and read everything that I can. I've been following it as it's been happening, but I haven't had the time to read all the detail yet. And I think it is such a superb example for everybody that you can really do what you want. You can get the courage to do things and you can surprise yourself. And that really is leading me on to the last question that I wanted to ask you. Many of us really do dream about breaking out of our normal existence and doing something to challenge and empower ourselves, really for our own self-development. And exactly as you've shown by taking this group of women who come from such different backgrounds and doing things that they'd really never dreamt of doing before. So give us some advice. What do you think? How can we start doing this? How can we start to break out of our normal existence? Are there any baby steps that you recommend really to get us started on our way?
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't have to be skiing to the North Pole.
That would be nice, though.
Something that, it could be, okay, I want to, run 5K, or I want to, whatever it is. I sometimes think that perhaps maybe that's the hardest step, is deciding what it is that you want to do. Yeah. Sometimes you just stumble across something and okay, this is it. This is what I want to do. Other times, it takes some looking, and you need to look and, and make a decision. But so I think the first baby step is to decide what it is you want to do. And then the second most important step is to make a start. And it doesn't matter how small that start is. Maybe it is just putting in your application for the local 5K. Maybe it is, starting a class to give you the skills to do whatever it is that you want to do. Maybe it's just telling someone that this is what I'm going to do. And, once somebody else knows, it's far more difficult to, start putting it off.
Yeah, exactly.
The most important thing is to make a start. And, it's so common that when people get to that point of making a start, they say things like, but it's not the right time because of this, or because of that, or because of one thing and the other. There is never going to be the perfect time. There's never going to be the perfect set of circumstances. And really, you can't afford to put it off, because if you start putting it off, then you'll be 10 years down the line still putting it off. So whatever it is, first thing is decide what it is you want to do, and secondly, make a start and stop putting it off.
Wonderful. Okay, right. Well, thank you very much, Felicity. It's really been a pleasure, and it's been fascinating to hear so much about it. It's such an inspiration for all of us.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. We'd like to thank our guest, Felicity Aston MBE, explorer, scientist, speaker, and author, for sharing her experience and vision on women's leadership, courage, endurance, and achievement, and the Euro-Arabian North Pole Expedition. I'm Anna Letitia Cook. You've been listening to us at Women Up Radio. Thanks also to Meryl Guzel